Bases dropped on another edition of Soccer Down Here. It is May 20th. It's a Wednesday. It's a Wall Pass Wednesday. So we'll be taking your questions throughout the show. You can send in your questions on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. You can send in your questions via email, soccerdownhere@gmail.com. You can send in your questions in a Facebook message. We're at Soccer Down Here there. You can send them in during Instagram. I'm not checking that one as much, but hey, if you're an IG guy, then cool. Soccer Down Here on Instagram. You can send them in the chat on Twitch, twitch.tv/Soccer Down Here. We can take care of you there too. We've got stuff everywhere around the world today, and John is wearing a very loud jersey this morning.
Well, you know, after our discussion yesterday, and we were trying to figure out maybe I should show support for Gillingham after our discussion about
our discussion meant nothing because you didn't.
True, but I wanted to be above the fray instead of showing any kind of favoritism. So I went to the top of the table, and John Nason will be happy to see if he watches the video version of this, or if he's listening to the audio version, that I am sporting a checkerboard Coventry City kit. So
orange and black checkerboard Coventry City kit from some awful designer season, what have you. No, Le Coq Sportif did not design it. They just made it. That's how these things work.
You would have figured that Le Coq Sportif would have sat there and looked at this and they're like, dog, really?
I don't know. It's monstrous. It's so bad that people probably like it. So, I mean, you know, it's one of those things, but it's bad. It's bad. It's loud. It's bad. Don't give loud. Clemson or any other orange team any ideas in this.
No.
It'd be very bad.
Correct.
All right. We got stuff. Where do you want to start?
Domestic with things that aren't necessarily a surprise, but the announcement is official with MLS.
Okay. Then tell us about the announcement. That's official.
Well, no All-Star game, canceled. No League Cup, canceled. No Campeones Cup, canceled. So 3 things canceled.
Yeah, that's not really that big of a deal. That's why I was like,
but it's officially official. I mean,
yippee! I'm
one of the worst secrets in the room.
No, it wasn't a secret. No. It was not a secret because we didn't know. The longer that we went without a season starting, it was a safe assumption. But This isn't that big of a deal. I mean, it's no offense to the All-Star game, which I actually really liked this idea of MLS All-Stars, Liga MX All-Stars. That would have been a lot of fun. But you can't fit it right now. Leagues Cup. I'm tired of the slander against Leagues Cup. Leagues Cup can be a very good thing. If you want to hate on it, good. Hate on it. Good for you. Your team is going to miss out on international competition right now that will make them better. So, yes, it is a bad thing to not be able to play Leagues Cup, but you can't do it right now. Campeones Cup was one of the first ones I thought would have to go, and it's not going to be played this year, and that's fine. That's where you're at. These are all secondary to finishing the season with as many games as possible. So it's not even. I mean, it's kind of like it comes through and it's like, yeah, okay, big deal. We expected that. Let's move on.
Yep. So that's where we are. That came up after our extra half hour yesterday. It still came up there in the middle of the afternoon. So All-Star Game, League Cup, Campeones Cup, all canceled.
Well, a couple things on MLS that are far more important. Don Garber spoke at an event on, I think this was late Monday, and Mark Burns at the Sports Business Journal Daily had this. Garber said, quote, "It is looking like it will be more challenging, unquote, than the league originally thought to play a 34-match schedule." He also talked a little bit about how the league and the teams are going to use technology in getting games played and getting fans involved. He said, I've seen images of virtual fans and digital fans that have been done in watch parties. I thought NASCAR did a great job with a Zoom watch party. I think you'll expect that when we get back to play, we'll do similar things. I don't think you can artificially replicate the environment in a stadium when you're playing without fans. I think we've got to focus in on the game on the field. When we do get back, you'll see some creative and not unprecedented but innovative technologies in those broadcasts without fans. So, MLS is trying to get a deal done with their players on a couple different fronts, and we've talked about it all week. You know, you've got the salary reduction front, which is going to be a argument, battle, debate back and forth about where that cut falls, who it falls on, how it falls. You have a proposal that has been given to the players. You have a counter proposal that has been given to the league. That needs to get done probably first. Second, you've got to figure out if this Orlando plan is viable. And I think the longer we go without an announcement that it's happening, the more I worry about it happening in the format that was proposed. Because you're going to have to get people prepared for this. I mean, the idea was that June 1st you would be in Orlando and training. It's May 20th. That's, you're cutting it close at this point. USL has had the same conversations with their players, and their Players Association issued a statement responding to the counter proposal that they received. We talked about the reporting from Jeff Roeder of The Athletic yesterday. The players issued their statement, and Paul Kennedy at Soccer America, I thought, kind of nailed all of it in the issues and boiling it down. So let's recap where things stand in USL. USL on the league side, they want changes to the standard player contracts. They want to insert return to work protocols. They want force majeure clauses protecting the league if play resumes or if the season is called off. They want a pay cut down to as low as $1,500 a month, and if play resumes, incremental cuts of 20% above as little as $1,000 to as much as 80% on earnings above $4,000 per month after the first 1,000. Okay, USLPA came back and said that the standard player contract was enforceable whether or not play resumes. The players did recognize that they need to work with the league here. They need to help the league. They said they recognize their role within, quote, a second division ecosystem that has been unstable for years, unquote. And they outlined a counter-proposal. Players would take a 10% cut in all remaining salaries over $2,000 a month in return for the league itself matching the players' salary cuts, the league giving money to the clubs, an agreement from clubs to a minimum salary of $20,000 a year beginning next season in 2021. There is no standard minimum salary in USL right now. And the league agreeing to increase its bargaining frequency to every 14 days until a CBA is reached, because they have never had a CBA. Okay, that's a little more digestible than what we had yesterday to work with. So it's down to the amounts that the cut would be. Obviously, the players want a smaller cut. The players want some things in return. They want a minimum salary going forward. They want more bargaining frequency in the short term until they get a CBA done. The league wants, obviously, a bigger cut to salaries. They want to insert return-to-work protocols, force majeure clauses, protecting the league. There's the money part of it, they'll find something somewhere in between and sort out. The other things, I don't know on what the league is asking for. The return-to-work protocol, I think, is going to happen whether it's part of a CBA or not. I think you're going to have that because we've seen it in every league around the world. Inserting a force majeure clause into a contract that doesn't already have it is going to be a tough pill to swallow for the players, because that gives the league a lot of latitude in changing a contract. Players probably don't want that. But the players might accept it if they get that minimum salary for next year, if they get that bargaining frequency to get the CBA done, where they could then negotiate about a force majeure clause. The league matching the player cuts, It's absolutely doable. It's kind of a weird request because it's not something we normally see where the players are asking somebody else to put money to the clubs, because you have the league, you have the clubs, you have the players in a situation. Is it possible? Yeah, it is. It's an odd request, and we'll see if it finds its way into it. Would the players stand firm on that and give up some of the things that they have to give up to get it? That's how any negotiation's going to go. I don't know if that's a major point for the players. I think that minimum salary going forward is probably what the PA is really looking for, along with mitigating cuts as much as they can.
In the PA release, also toward the bottom, the USLPA says, with the counterproposal, players making $2,000 a month or lower would not be affected. Implementing a salary floor is something the league also incorporated into their May 7 request for economic relief, and the USLPA says it sheds light on the need for a minimum salary moving forward. This has been a primary concern for players amidst a drawn-out collective bargaining process, and also under the players' counterproposal, clubs willing and able to honor the original terms of 2020 player contracts may elect to do so.
Yeah, Kennedy had that salary floor in there. It's the players would take a 10% cut on all remaining salaries over $2,000 a month.
Right.
So that's establishing a minimum salary.
Yeah, and so I think it's interesting to hear the players' side and then asking the league to match, and in just trying to process it a little bit, it sounds like it would be a way to doubly cover any perceived possible loss that the league on the whole, all three parts, would have in this very unique situation. So once again, we talk about this three-part negotiation and the three-party negotiation, really, and the unique nature of it. And so now we have the USLPA side, and once again, it's where do we go from here, with one side saying one thing and the players having this as their counterproposal.
Yeah, we'll have to see how this gets sorted out. I think it's going to come down to the dollars and cents as the key elements here. Everything else is gravy around it, but there's some of the things that'll be traded off to get to where people want to get. NWSL, they are close, according to Stephen Goff of the Washington Post, to finalizing plans for a month-long tournament in Salt Lake City. It'd be a precursor to possibly returning to a regular schedule later this year. 4 people told Stephen Goff that they're close to the situation, said that yesterday. The 9 owners have voted in favor of proceeding from the NWSL. Not all U.S. national team players are sold on the plan. That's according to 2 different people. Ashlyn Harris deleted an Instagram story that was critical of going back to play, to train. It was a little vague as to exactly what the issue was, but I believe the post was mainly based around social distancing and saying that you want us to go do this, and we can't because of social distancing. The NWSL, you got 23 players from the women's national team World Cup squad last year. They've asked teams to submit rosters, essential staff that would travel to Utah. Everyone would begin undergoing testing this week. Healthcare officials in many states have reported an abundance of testing equipment. That's not necessarily the case everywhere. Teams in hard-hit areas like Sky Blue in New Jersey, Chicago Red Stars, they would go early because they can't do anything right now in their home areas. NWSL teams would remain in a controlled environment, people familiar with the plan said. They'd undergo regular testing. As of Tuesday in Utah, state reported 7,518 cases, 88 deaths. It's one of 11 states with fewer than 100 deaths. Tournament is slated to begin June 27 or 28. 3 3-team groups. You'd play everybody in your group twice, so 4 games. Then everybody but one team would go to the quarterfinals. Then it'd be single knockout. CBS Sports would carry it, TV and digital, and part of the idea is to get back before others do. That is one element of it, according to people close to the situation. and if health conditions allow, begin scheduling regular season matches in home markets later in the summer or in the fall.
You have multiple venues available since you have RSL playing at Rio Tinto. You have Real Monarchs playing at Zions Bank Stadium in Harriman. So there's more than one place to have your practices, have your matches played, that kind of stuff. So with both of them operated by RSL, you have the opportunity to have this kind of a tournament if it gets to this particular point. But I think, what was it, that Utah was diminished, was taken down a level when it comes to the level of emergency or perceived
State
emergency
was,
by the
Salt
governor.
Lake City wasn't.
Right. So that's kind of where we are right now. And so once again, this is something that's been put out there by the NWSL, and the players are going to continue to make their thoughts known on the issue. But once again, it's about getting out there and having, and I like the idea of giving the teams from the Northeast the idea of getting in and getting settled first, so that way they can get those additional practices and somewhat get up to closer to full song than the other teams that have had the chance to have individual workouts, like North Carolina Courage, and talked to Paul Riley, the head coach of the Courage, briefly about that last week when we caught up with him on the 1v1. So completely understand the logistics that are being presented here. Let's just see what the next steps are with the NWSL and if the Utah plan comes to fruition.
We'll see if they're able to get this done. But when you have national team players who are not happy about it, and Ashlyn Harris going on Instagram, now it was deleted, but it was posted out, that's going to be something that complicates it for the NWSL side, because you're not just dealing with kind of one players association, you're almost dealing with two different kinds of players, maybe even three, because you have your domestic players, you have your international players, and you have your national team players who are all coming from different perspectives. And I don't know, that's a lot to juggle from the NWSL side, but they're trying to get something done. We'll just see if they can get the players on board to do it, because as we're seeing in England, that's not necessarily an easy thing to do, and we'll have to see how they get it done.
Yeah. So obviously we're keeping an eye on what's going on with the ideas out of the USL and the NWSL from this morning's updates and what went down yesterday.
Yes, we will be doing that. Meg Linehan of The Athletic followed up and said the common theme of her calls around the NWSL yesterday was that the plan was still very, very fluid, and that the new commissioner, Lisa Baird, is getting very positive reviews on leadership from everybody involved for trying to handle this. So it is it's good that you're at least getting that point. It's good that you're getting the new commissioner working with everybody to try to figure this out. But it's a tricky plan. It's a very tricky plan to get sorted out.
Tafka's in this morning with a logistics question, and he just wants to know. Now, is there a concern for overuse of fields? He says, we are talking about a bunch of games on just one or two fields in a relatively short time frame.
You'd be two fields, and you're talking about, what? I don't know what the time frame is, so I'm kind of guessing here as to what exactly it is. You're going to play not even two. Well, you could play 2 games a day if you wanted to. And you got 2 fields. You've got the Monarchs field and you've got Rio Tinto. So you're not going to play. Well, actually, you could play 3 games a day, would be the maximum you could play. You could play doubleheaders. You could play a single game there. You could rotate. I don't think it's a huge issue. I think you can make that work. I think that's minimal. And you got to remember that these fields haven't had anything going on for a while, so they should be in pristine shape to start with. That should help.
Yeah, so you're talking, if you're looking at the Utah plan, a maximum of 10 matches, and then having other places and other fields for practices for all the teams?
No, not a maximum of 10 matches. You're playing everybody in your group twice.
Oh, twice. Okay, so that's 20.
Then quarterfinals, then semis, then a final.
Okay. So you're looking 4, 8, 12, Yeah, so 15, 16, somewhere in there?
Yes. Yeah, you're trying to do math, and it's way too early for that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not wearing shoes, so I could do math quickly.
That's gross. Anyway. All right. For those of you trying to join us on Twitch, John's shirt broke it, so we're trying to navigate that while we do the show as well. Right. I'm blaming it on the shirt. Absolutely.
Sure thing. I'm right there with it.
It's always worked, and then John wears an orange and black checkerboard shirt, and it breaks down.
Yeah, so John Nason actually says he can't. He heard us loud and clear. He says he prefers this purple and yellow number from Pony that is a shirt that he has posted behind him this morning, and he has a hashtag Go Tigers GEAUX with the purple and gold.
Yeah, I mean, I like the light blue. I like Coventry's classic look.
Yes.
They get a little drunken with their other looks, and that's not good. They need to lay off the alcohol.
Yeah.
Because they're ridiculous.
Yeah. It is a Wall Pass Wednesday. Joe Johnston has already sent in his Wall Pass Wednesday question. All right. And so we can get into that a little later on. But if you guys have any questions about anything going on this planet or any other when it comes to the sport or just anything in general, it's what Wall Pass Wednesdays are all about. Go ahead and let us know what's on your mind on the Twitters at Soccer Down Here. You can reach out to us individually at OSG Nelson, at Longshoe. We've got Facebook. We've got mail. We have Carrier Pigeon. We have Twitch when it's
no, we don't have Carrier Pigeon. Don't give anybody any ideas.
Okay, so a bunch of different ways to get in touch with us here on a Wall Pass Wednesday, and it's good to get everybody's thoughts on everything. And apparently, Chris Hutchison thinks that I have abacus toes, but it's more like Chisenbop, I think, at this point.
That's all gross, and I don't want to ever hear about it again.
Blame Chris Hutchison. He's the one who sent it in.
You talked about taking your shoes off and counting with
your toes. I
never
had them on.
So.
Never had him on this
Ay, Dios mío. Anyway.
And so now Katie Weaver, having heard the discussion about what we're wearing this morning, she is moving from the app to Twitch out of shirt curiosity.
Yeah, we're live on Twitch now. We've got it back, so hopefully it can withstand the ridiculous hideousness of John's shirt.
And the hideous ridiculousness as well. You though, have broken out the Footy Mob City of Atlanta shirt, the Air Atlanta shirt, which is very cool.
Mm-hmm. It's very cool that our friends at Footy Mob sent us jerseys.
That they did.
And it was a very nice thing for them to do.
Yes, it was. But, so that's where we are this morning. As always, it's a Wall Pass Wednesday, and we got a lot of stuff to talk about off the field and a bunch of other places. But send us your thoughts, your questions, and anything else on your mind here at the middle of the week.
All right, you filled enough time. Let's move forward. Simon Stone, BBC, talking about UEFA. Top flight European clubs stand to lose more than $3.5 billion because of COVID-19, even if they come back and finish seasons. If they don't, that could go up to $6.2 billion. Wow. To get the next round of UEFA competitions 2020 and 2021, they could have one-off ties during qualifying. They could have regional qualifying if they're going to get this stuff started. One of the major obstacles is the medical protocols across all of UEFA. Tim Meyer is in charge of their medical committee at UEFA. He's also been heavily involved in the protocols developed by the Bundesliga. So he'll be able to take those best practices and work with them. But are you going to be able to do that in every country? And he said, while the 28 clubs from 12 countries still in this season's Champions League, this season's Europa League, should be able to handle these protocols, expanding that across the entire continent could be a very difficult challenge. Taking those protocols, which are expensive, which are difficult, which are heavily involved, and taking those to the Faroe Islands, taking those to a club from Wales, taking those to small clubs that qualify, it's going to be difficult. Borussia Dortmund, just to give you an idea of the costs that these clubs are facing right now, They are estimating that playing behind closed doors will cost them £2.6 million per game. That's what they're losing by playing. Now, Visible, which is a business analyst in the UK, they're estimating Premier League clubs will lose £878 million if matches have to be played behind closed doors until the end of next season. The bigger clubs are going to have the bigger losses because of what they bring in on a game day. That would cost Manchester United, for example, £140 million if they don't play in front of fans next season at all. It's scary when you start to dig into it. UEFA is trying to figure a lot of things out because of this. In Marca yesterday, Jose Felix Diaz wrote that they're about to release the plan on how to conclude Champions League, Europa League this season. Right now, that plan is to start on August 2nd. Europa League's remaining last 16 games would be played. Round of 16 would be completed the following weekend, along with the Champions League second legs that need to get played. Because you have, if I remember right, you had some Champions League games played that week, and you had Europa League not play at all. So you have Champions League, I think, that has played the first leg of everything in the round of 16, and Europa League didn't start it. Correct?
That is what I am looking up at the moment to see where we are.
Don't. It's all good. It's all good. You're going to go down a rabbit hole, and then we've lost you for 2 hours. Okay. So August 2nd, first round of 16 in Europa League. August 9th, second round of the round of 16 in both competitions. Over the following weeks, teams will play quarterfinals and semifinals at a rate of 2 games per week, with each tie over 2 legs, as normal. Champions League final, August 26. Europa League final, August 23. Now, depending on how things go between now and when they announce this plan, they have been figuring out a one-legged quarterfinal, semifinal, final 4, with the final 4 being played in Istanbul. So semis and final being played in Istanbul. They're supposed to announce their decision June 17th. And that announcement is also going to include the 12 venues where the 2020 Euros will be played next year in 2021. And reportedly, there are a few venues that there's some issues with on multiple fronts that might be changed out. So be on the lookout for that. We've had a lot of conversations about salary caps, and we're going to talk about it in the lower divisions in England here in a minute, but this is going all the way up to UEFA. And remember, financial fair play is kind of, sort of a cap, but not exactly. There's talk out of Germany. Karl-Heinz Rummenigge of Bayern Munich wants to institute a salary cap. That has gotten all the way to UEFA, and they want to work with UEFA on this. And Germany has pushed for this before. But Alexander Seferin, the head of UEFA, told Sebastian Fest of The Guardian about financial fair play. He said, right now, if they don't follow the rules, they will always be sanctioned. But of course, we are thinking about how we can improve our regulations and, if necessary, adapt to new times. This will not happen very soon, but we are thinking of improving financial fair play, modernizing it, and doing something more about the competitive balance. We are also considering some sort of luxury tax, if it is possible. So there are many ideas, but trust me, during these difficult times, we have stopped thinking more or less about changes that will happen in the future. Now we have to steer our ship onto the right course, and we are close to doing it. Then when things calm down, we will go back to the old tasks. That's going to come back and bite them if they're not thinking of the future. I think they have to. I think you have to take advantage of this opportunity to try to look into the future, because you're not going to get it again. And this is something that UEFA and every league has to consider right now, because, look, UEFA, okay, they want to modernize financial fair play. They want to have a luxury tax. They want to do all these things. When are they going to have a time to actually consider it in a reasonable way after this? You're talking about playing your Champions League, Europa League in August in a sprint to the final. then you're talking about almost immediately starting your qualification rounds for next year's European competitions. You are adding a new European competition next year, the Conference League. You are then playing the European Championships next summer. You are then playing the Women's Euros the following summer in 22, where you would normally have a World Cup, but that's going to be in the winter. You've got to schedule World Cup qualifiers in a completely different window. You've got so many things coming up that you've got to schedule those out, but you're not going to make any changes down the road because you're not going to have time to. You're going to need to consider that now and try to get ahead of the financial hit that these clubs are going to face. If you don't, you're never going to do it at the UEFA level, and it's going to be down to country by country sorting these things out, which is not the most fair way to do it. If Europe and UEFA want to do something with financial fair play to modernize it, make it more powerful, do it now. Do it now, figure it out, get the voting done. You can make the implementation spread out over time. That's fine. But you got to get the nuts and bolts of the idea down now and approved, because you're not going to do it later.
Yeah, Germany Federation boss Fritz Keller told his federation in an article that was posted to the website, "We must bring professional football closer to the people again. We have to think about a salary cap. Commissions for player advisors and huge transfer sums are increasingly irritating society and alienating it from our beloved sport. COVID-19 offers the opportunity to look ahead and to reposition football in order to preserve it for future generations," end quote.
Yep. I think the irritating society thing's a little silly and overplayed. I don't really think that they should be deciding how much to pay their players based on people's reactions to it. If clubs are making money and players are making money for those clubs, yep, pay those players. If the clubs are not making money and you've got clubs that feel like they have to continue to spend big money, well, then they're going to go broke. And you're trying to prevent that. The salary cap, if I'm not mistaken, the first salary cap in pro sports was in the NBA, right?
Yes.
And it was created in the NBA because they were not in a good position financially when they created it. Because the NBA was at least, it was before the Jordan effect really hit, and it was even after Bird and Magic had come in. So I'm trying to check. I think it was 84. No. The NBA had a salary cap in the mid-40s, but it was abolished after 1 year. No cap until 84-85, and it was instituted in an attempt to level the playing field and ensure competitive balance. Before the cap was reinstated, teams could spend whatever they wanted. First season under the new cap, they were limited to $3.6 million in total payroll. That's bonkers to consider now.
Yeah, I'm kidding.
Later, they went to the percentage. 2005 CBA salaries were capped at 57% of basketball-related income. That lasted through 2011. Cap went down to 51.2% of basketball-related income, and it's been between 49 and 51% of that basketball-related income. Teams have to spend 90% of the cap every year. So you have a floor and you have a cap. Then you have all kinds of other things around the cap, like exceptions, bird rights, bird rules, all kinds of different elements to give you more flexibility. But you have a floor, you have a cap. UEFA, it might be hard for UEFA to do that.
Yeah.
But league to league could do it. And this is where UEFA is in a tough spot, because I don't think they can mandate a cap across every league, and you can't deal with the differences between every country, between labor laws in every country. Financial fair play, and a strong financial fair play that is making clubs be fiscally responsible, is probably as far as UEFA can go. But I think they're going to want to try to have leagues create a cap, because the tough part, and Look, I don't know. I mean, it's hard for us to compare, in this neck of the woods because our Champions League is not the same as the UEFA Champions League. But, if Germany makes the decision to go to a cap, and it's sounding more and more like they will, Spain has a kind of cap. If Italy decides to go to a cap, and then let's say the Premier League says, screw it, we're not going to a cap. We're going to spend as much as we want. That should give a competitive advantage to the Premier League clubs, both in terms of attracting players and in these games where they're playing clubs from leagues with a cap. Does that matter? Is that going to be a big sticking point for Serie A to say, well, no, we're not going to do a cap because then we'll get beat up in Champions League or in Europa League? Yeah. I don't know if it would stop it. I don't know. The domestic league is the number one trophy in all of these. Pep Guardiola's talked about it in England. Most managers in most countries, outside of a very small number of clubs who have won a lot of domestic titles, say that the domestic title is the number one trophy each year. The Champions League is secondary. If UEFA can't mandate a salary cap across all of its members, you could see some leagues that say, nope, we're not going to do it. They're going to have financial problems down the road, or some clubs are going to have financial problems almost immediately. I think you're going to see some leagues institute a salary cap after this. And I think Germany will probably be the first one because of all the noise that's coming out. Are they going to worry about how that affects their ability to compete in Europe? That's the part I just don't know. I don't know if that's going to be the moment of pause for that.
So then let me ask you this, and this came out in the Sun, and it was staggering to me when I saw the numbers. But you have a team like Barcelona, and right now, the way that it's being presented in the Scottish Sun, there are only 3 players who are untouchable: Messi, De Jong, Ter Stegen. When you bring in Antoine Griezmann, you have an annual wage bill of now over £500 million.
Yep.
You're really, you've got to bring in, according to the article, they have to bring in £106 million by the end of June to balance the books. So in a situation
how much by the end of June?
£106 million.
They're not bringing that in. There's no way they can. Unless there's TV money still out there to be paid.
Yeah. The article has Griezmann's £300,000 a week wage brings the annual wage for the club to £550 million and left the board knowing they needed to bring in $106 million by the end of June to balance the books.
I don't know how you're going to do it because there's no guarantee you're going to have a transfer window to work with either at that time. I don't think you will. Barcelona, we talked about the La Liga financial fair play / salary cap system. It's based off expected income. And this is going to be a year where that all falls apart because your expected income ain't happening this year. There's no way it can because of playing behind closed doors and the stoppage. So the idea coming out of Spain last week was that Barcelona was going to have to cut expenses by at least 200 million euro. It might have been 200 million pounds, one or the other. It's a lot. That's for next year. That's in next season. But it sounds like they've got issues straight away in terms of just cash flow. And that's a huge club that is dealing with this. But, I think it's easy to throw shade at Barcelona. They did not expect a pandemic, and they are getting found out for some bad contracts that they have signed to keep players together and keep a team together longer than maybe they should have. And then you go and you get a Griezmann, you go and you get a Coutinho because you can, but they haven't always worked out. You're on the hook for a lot with Coutinho, and the idea was that you were going to sell him for a big return this summer. Not happening now. You might get a return, but it's not going to be what you needed and expected. You signed salaries. You brought in a Griezmann expecting to be able to balance that with a sale of Coutinho. That's not going to happen now. You're in a really tough spot. So you're probably going to have to move some players that you'd rather not because they do have some value. You're going to have to play some young players that you maybe don't think are ready because you're not going to have anybody else in the squad. Barcelona's going to be very, very different next year because of all this.
Right now, Semedo has been offered to clubs for an asking price of £40 million. And now, with the current marketplace being what it is, I don't think you're going to get £40 million for Semedo.
It's hard to say. I'm not going to go there yet because I don't know if we really know what the marketplace is going to be just yet, because we don't know when it's going to be more than anything.
Yeah. And so you're looking at guys like Umtiti and Dembele and Coutinho and Semedo and all of these guys in a marketplace that, as of right now, is about as unsure as it gets. And it's going to force Barcelona into some business decisions because they have to meet that number that's 9 figures to the left of the decimal place, and they got to do it soon.
Well, no, we got to be clear on this. There's two different things. The June thing, there's nothing they can do. You're not selling Semedo before June because you're not going to have a window open to sell Semedo before June. So you can sell Semedo for whatever you can get Semedo for, but you're not going to do it before that end of June issue where you don't have money, period. Next year, you're going to have to slash $200 million. So let's make this clear, according to the two reports that are out there. End of June, you are struggling to basically make payroll, and you need 100 plus million pounds to get there by the end of June. That is 5 weeks away. You're not going to have a transfer window in 5 weeks. You're not going to be able to sell anybody in 5 weeks. Okay. Then for next season, according to the La Liga version of financial fair play / salary cap, you're going to need to cut your expenses, and it's not just on the payroll. It's everything combined. You're going to have to cut your expenses by at least 200 million pounds, probably more, because the longer you play without fans, the more it's going to hit you. Those are two different things. Those are not the same thing. So you got to bring in money now, or take out a loan, or figure out however you're going to do it, and then you're going to have to cut it for next year. So as we've seen, we talked about it yesterday, Malaga has basically went into the Spanish version of Chapter 11 in a lot of ways. They are suspending and or terminating player contracts to ensure the club's survival. It's massive redundancies, collective redundancy is the phrasing that was used. It's kind of like a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's allowing them to get out of contracts. This is a club that had more financial problems at Barcelona, but a second division team is already at that point. Barca's got to find a way to make their payroll. Players took a 70% cut. 70. 7-0. And you still need 100 million plus at the end of June?
Yep.
I mean, I do think Barcelona will be able to find a loan or find money somehow, but they're not owned by some rich guy. They're a membership club. They're not built the same way. They're not going to sell to some rich guy. But where are they going to come up with that money to bridge this gap? I don't know. And then that doesn't solve everything, because then next season you've got to slash what you're spending in a big, big way. Probably, you're talking at least 20%. You got to cut your expenses next year. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that, for me, that's going to be, it's because of the bright lights that surround Barcelona as much as it does, because of how successful they are on the pitch. I mean, for me, this is going to be one of the larger stories that we're going to have to keep an eye on for the next, 13 months, not just for the next 5 weeks, but for the end of this fiscal year and then the next fiscal year, to see how Barcelona responds to something like this.
Yeah, and Nathan Pugh brought up the Spain may have a cap, but they can also sign players outside the window. That's a league rule. That's a La Liga rule that they couldn't just sign anybody outside the window. They could only sign a player who was already in Spain, because you can't bring in a player from outside the country outside of the international transfer windows. it's a stupid rule. And yeah, they planned poorly. They absolutely did. But just because of that, these are separate issues. Barcelona had issues already. They had injury issues. They took advantage of a rule that was there that others could have taken advantage of. It's a stupid rule. It should be eliminated, especially because you're able to buy a player from a team. Now, this is why clubs need to be very careful with their release clauses, because I'm trying to remember which club it was. Who was it? Mallorca, who had the player purchased from by Barcelona. Don't right. Go down a rabbit hole. It's fine. They had a release clause, so they didn't even have to negotiate. The Barcelona could hit the release clause. Player can go. It's done. Club has nothing to do about it. And then that club couldn't go out and add anybody when they lost somebody. That's if you're going to have the first part of the rule, you've got to have the second, where the club that loses somebody can then go out and try to buy somebody as well. Stupid rule. Spain still has some kind of fiscal responsibility that no other league outside of MLS really does. Financial fair play is not as strong as what the Spanish one was. Even that, people can always find ways to work around it. Barcelona, and this is the important part about it, you have to understand. Barcelona was within the Spanish cap / financial fair play rules because they brought in huge revenues. They were able to spend a ton of money because they brought in a ton of money. Well, now you've had that ton of money that's on a rug pulled out from under you, and you've fallen on your face. You didn't expect that, and it's come back to bite you. You were already edging into a dangerous place, obviously, because you had to take advantage of the loophole rule and go sign another player. But you spent, and it's something that came up at the end of the Last Dance about Michael Jordan. It comes up about every team that has won a lot and been together for a while. When is it time to move on? And Barcelona has spent a lot of money over the years to keep players in the club. Messi, a little bit different conversation. But they've spent a ton of money to keep people. Some people they probably didn't need to spend the money on to keep them around as long as they did. That did two things. One, you kept an older player in the team, and look, they haven't won as many Champions Leagues as they did before. Is that because it's an older team? Possibly. Management, coaching, all that factors into it too. But the other thing is you got away from who you are. Barcelona developed as a club that played young players when they were ready to play. Barcelona's gotten away from that. So now you're hit on two sides. You have an old club, an old roster, a lot of high-priced contracts in that roster that you got to move, and you haven't prepared your young players coming up to take their place. So you're stuck in a lot of ways. Wouldn't have happened without this in this severity, this level of severity, but it was going to happen at some point. They had to start moving away from that model. You can't keep the band together forever because they get old and they can't play as well, and you don't have as great of a return, and other clubs will pass you. Barcelona, I think, was already in that risk factor of Real Madrid jumping further ahead of them, even Atleti jumping further ahead. Now Barcelona's in a really tough spot, and they have to get back to their basics of developing talent. There's no other way around it right now for them because they're not going to have the money to be who they've been over the last few years.
And this is taking the salary figures, and I'm putting them off to the side. This is just money in, money out being spent on transfers and sales. 17-18, the year that they brought in Coutinho and Dembele, it was minus $155 million. They spent $155 million more in 17-18 than they brought in. Mm-hmm. They were actually on the plus $5 million side in 18-19. For 19,
now this is just on transfers.
This is just transfers.
Yeah, because this is different. the idea on Spain's cap is based around revenue. It's like financial fair play in that regard. So they could spend more than they sell because they're making more money to make up for that difference. So keep that in mind. Go ahead.
Yes. And then 1920, that is a minus $126 million. Arrivals, Griezmann, De Jong, Martin Braithwaite was Leganes for $20 million. That was the in-league pickup that they had in the year. So arrivals,
Leganes. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you spent $300 million bringing folks in: Griezmann, De Jong, Braithwaite, Neto, etc. You only had $175 million go out in 1920 in player sales. In 2021, right now, you're at minus $35 million with 3 players that you brought in and 2 that have gone.
Yeah, that's not the issue to me. It's not so much the transfer fees. I think with most clubs, that's what we zero in on. It's the salaries. They're spending obscene amounts of money on salary for players that at some point you've got to let go. You've just got to let them move on. Whether you're bringing back a return in a transfer or not. Barca has done I guess the Saints would be a team to look at in the NFL, where they just kept signing guys to keep them and kicking cap issues down the road. Spain does have a limitation. It's not as strong of a limitation like the NFL, like the NBA, where okay, you can have a few stars, but then you've got to surround them with lesser paid guys. But you've run into that a little bit, Barcelona.
Falcons?
Go ahead.
What about the Falcons with Ryan and Julio, and then having a bunch of other lesser paid folks to fill out your roster?
Yeah, but they haven't had to kick cap issues down the road as much as like the Saints did. I mean, the Saints have been able to manage it, so it shows you a different way. But maybe the NBA is a better situation here. When you went to the super teams, that when the Heat brought in LeBron, and you had LeBron, you had Wade, you had Bosh, and then you had guys playing for a minimum to be on that team because they wanted to win a ring, and they did 2 out of 4 years. We've seen it where you have 3 superstars, maybe a great draft pick to go along with it who's on a really good manageable salary number, and then a bunch of guys playing for the minimum. Some guys are going to take less money to play for a top team. That can happen in a Barcelona situation as well, but it's harder to do in the soccer world to have all your money tied up in Messi, in Busquets, in a handful of players on crazy numbers. Especially Messi's special. We know that. But as much as I love Busquets, couldn't you go get another holding midfielder at a better price point to do the things that he's doing to be able to spread that money around, or promote the next young player coming through your academy and give them those minutes to learn from it? That's what they used to do. That's what they did with Guardiola, who was then replaced by Xavi, by Iniesta. That's what you did, is you got to a point with a player, when they got to that point where they needed the big money salary, Barcelona would move on. Messi, different conversation. You're going to keep him as long as you can keep him, and you'll pay him whatever you got to pay to keep him. Outside of him, they should have moved on from players sooner, either to go get young talent and develop it, or to bring up young talent from their academy and develop it, and keep their expenses and their financial side more manageable. Well, now it's blown up in their face, and now they're not ready to play a bunch of young guys, but they're going to have to, because they're not going to be able to spend the money, not on transfers as much as it is on actual salary. That's where they're going to really get hit. That's why they have an issue right now making payroll at the end of June. They're going to have a huge issue on the salary front, and it's going to affect their transfer budget, but they got to sell guys to bring in quick cash, but they can't just go replace them with more high-salary players. They don't have the money to do it.
So, like I said, it's going to be... I want to see how Barcelona... This is going to be an interesting case study in what you mentioned with keeping folks too long, having a massive wage bill, all of that combined, and then how you handle it as we come out the other side when it comes to all of these leagues and all of the questions that we have. This is going to be an interesting test case.
Beyond an interesting test case, it's going to be fascinating to see if they can keep the lights on.
Yeah,
I mean, we're talking to this degree, and this is the part that people have wanted to leave under the rug right now. You're going to have these conversations. Are clubs going to be able to continue to operate? Period. You're going to have some bigger clubs that you would say, well, why are they falling apart? Well, these are the things that have come back to bite you. You didn't expect it. You didn't expect to have games behind closed doors this year. You didn't expect for the transfer market to collapse. It did. And you weren't ready for it. And there's going to be collateral damage. Period. It's going to happen. Katie Weaver on Twitter said, 3 years from now, who's writing the tell-all book on COVID effect on European football? And what is the book's tagline? How a global pandemic stopped football in its tracks and humbled giants. How COVID managed to level an uneven playing field. It's going to be a little bit more than 3 years, I think. I think we're probably talking over the next 5 years, things do get leveled a little bit. My fear is that it doesn't necessarily level the playing field for everybody. It does for most, but your Real Madrids, your Manchester Cities, your Liverpools, your Manchester Uniteds, if they could actually get a director of football who had a clue.
Yeah.
That's probably it. Newcastle, if they have their sale go through, and if they spend the money that they've been rumored to talk about spending, if PSG spends, but they haven't been able to do it now, maybe it's just a little bit diluted playing field. You're going to have a handful of clubs that the separation is even larger from the rest of the pack. That's my worry. But the majority of clubs, will be leveled out a little bit. Lower divisions, I think, will be very leveled and maybe leveled in the destruction sense, because I think you're going to have to look at some different structures going forward with lower divisions. I don't think it's going to be something we necessarily know how it all sorts out after a year, after 2 years, maybe even after 3 years. It might be, honestly, once we get to the end of the 2026 cycle for the World Cup, we might be able to look back on it then and say, okay, this is what happened, because I think it'll be easier to look back once the turnaround has started. And, I mean, just from a calendar perspective right now, you've got to get the season finished one way or another. You've then got to get the next season started as fast as possible. You've got World Cup qualifiers. You've got Copa Americas, Gold Cups, Euros next year. You've got all kinds of stuff next summer. You've got a transfer window, hopefully next summer in a normal sense in terms of timing, because this one won't be. The January one probably won't be. It won't be until next summer that maybe you have a normal transfer window. Then you'll have the World Cup in winter of 22, which will help in some ways, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe after that we'll have a glimpse, but I wouldn't write the book until the 26th World Cup, because I think you're going to need to see things start to come back a little bit to see how far it went down.
Yeah.
My fear is that this creates more separation at the top, and you have a very small number of clubs that can realistically compete to win a Champions League. That's my fear. In some leagues, I think in Germany, I don't know if anything's necessarily going to change, because they've worked together really well. Bayern will take a little bit more of a hit because of what their game day revenue is compared to some smaller clubs, but not dramatically. Maybe some of the commercial stuff, they'll take a hit. Maybe they won't be quite as far out in front. In Italy, maybe Juventus won't be quite as far out in front, but I think that was already narrowing with Inter and and now Lazio and other clubs that are going to push. Spain, I don't know what Atleti's situation is. Real Madrid will be further out in front of anybody than they've ever been. And in England, I think it's going to create a dramatic separation between the richer clubs and the poorer clubs. I think you will not even have a big 4 or big 6 anymore. I think the gap from City and Liverpool just goes even further.
Then would you consider Spurs and Chelsea as a part of how big a group that would
There's
be
no group
number 2?
There's no group number 2 doesn't matter. Who cares? It doesn't matter. I don't know if Tottenham and Chelsea and Arsenal and Manchester United, who could be, I think, money-wise in that top group, but they haven't shown it on the field in forever, so I don't know when they'll get there. But the second group, I think the second group's going to be closer to the third group than they'll be to the first group. So I don't know if it's really going to matter. Yippee, you're in the second group. You're barely ahead of Leicester and the rest. You know, the thing is, at that point, Tottenham was probably looking at making a ton of money playing in their brand new stadium and having a bunch of people in there. Well, that ain't happening. So are they really any different than, you know, I mean, who's a club who's bringing in 20,000 a game in the Premier League in the middle of the table instead? How different is Tottenham going to be than that club anymore? Probably not very different. The second, you know, I guess when you look at it, if you want to say 3 groups in England,
yeah,
it's going to be Manchester City and Liverpool way ahead of everybody. I mean, you might be able to see them in the distance. The second group and the third group will be pretty close. Yippee, you can separate them however you want. Everything below that is not being run like a Premier League club. And you're going to have clubs in the Premier League that will get there through promotion and, you know, maybe clubs that hang on in there because of good performances, but they don't have the financial wherewithal to be a Premier League club. And that's what it's going to be. And then beyond that, who knows? I mean, Championship, League One, League Two, how different are they really going to be when all of this settles out? I don't know.
And I think for me, if the sale goes through with Newcastle, and
they've still got to run it right.
Yeah,
they've still got to run it right. Manchester United, money-wise, absolutely could be part of the Manchester City-Liverpool group, but they haven't shown any ability to do so. Like, the money doesn't necessarily make you a well-run club. It helps. It gives you a whole lot of outs.
Yeah.
You know, think about it like if you're playing poker with your friends, if you have a whole bunch of money, well, you've got a lot of different ways to play it. If you're playing Texas Hold'em, for example, and you've got a big stack, you've got all the chips to start with. Well, if you've heard, like, you know, top players play, and maybe I'm thinking of this because I saw Rounders recently, again for the 27th time, probably more than that. If you have the big stack, you can play in a different way.
Yes.
You can lean on teams. You can take more chances. You have more outs. If you don't have the big stack, you better get things right because you don't have as much margin for error. Right. Manchester United is still hanging around where they are because they've got a stupid amount of money, and they can do that. That doesn't guarantee that they're in that top group. Newcastle's got to show it. Like, yay, they have a bunch of money. Yay, they're going to spend more money than they've spent before. Yippee, they might go sign a bunch of guys that are busters and crash out and not do anything. You can't just change the culture overnight. Manchester City, for all of the money that they brought into it when they did, it took them a while. It didn't happen overnight. They had to go through a bunch of managers. They'd have fleeting success and it'd go away. It doesn't happen overnight anymore. You know, Chelsea, little bit different situation when Abramovich took over. That feels like a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Different world. Now, for Newcastle to go from where they are to the top, they've got to show it. They will have the money to be at the front of the second group based on their money. But that doesn't guarantee you anything. You've got to do things right. You've got to sign the right players. You've got to have the right manager. You've got to use the money correctly.
Yeah. And so that obviously that's why I wanted to bring up the guys like Newcastle, if they bring in the right personnel off the pitch to bring in the players to be successful. And then Chelsea, for me, Abramovich has always been a bit of a wild card. There are times where he's invested, they've done well, and then there's times when he's invested and they have done not so well. And that's
no, the reason for Abramovich is very easy. He doesn't have the patience. It's very easy.
How many managers have they blown through?
I don't know, a ton. Same as Manchester City did at the beginning until they got the guy they wanted in Guardiola.
Yep.
I mean, you have to have the right manager. You can have all the money in the world. Real Madrid has been the one that has shown that they have so much money, they can get so much talent that at times it can just solve itself. Outside of them, and you're talking about a very different league with a different level of competition, I think, across the board. Outside of them, especially for a club on the way up, a club who isn't that club, who isn't established as the big dog. Real Madrid has an aura whether they have a good manager or not. Newcastle doesn't.
Yeah,
I don't think Chelsea does. And Chelsea has had great success and some meh.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got to be more. I think any club like this has got to be more consistent. They've got to get the right person, and they've got to stick with them. Jose Mourinho was the right person for Chelsea at the beginning, and he had incredible success. He's abrasive. Abramovich can be abrasive. It didn't work long term, and they've never recovered from that. Never truly recovered from that initial run with Mourinho, because it was great, but it didn't set any foundational elements for future success. They've been very good because they have money. They've had great seasons. But are they at the top of the league now? Nope. They're not.
Wires put together.
I was going to look at Chelsea managers and see what's going on. So I was going to go down that rabbit hole, but I just know that there've been a lot of different folks.
No, don't go down that rabbit hole. We got a rabbit hole to go down in England right now because we got a ton of stuff to talk about.
We do.
Let's get.
For we are the BBC News Service. No, not now.
Now. Man, I hope I got a BBC story. I don't. No, I do out of Wales, actually. I've got a BBC story out of Wales. Okay. Wales has done what a lot of leagues have done. They've confirmed the end of their domestic leagues. They have champions. They have not sorted out promotion relegation yet. They will decide upon that in due course. They have ended their women's league as well. Economic issues, you're not going to be able to play in Wales. What are you doing on your camera right now? Because you're spinning around like a loon.
Yes. Yeah, well, we have an electrician in the house, so I'm changing locations simultaneously while we're on the air.
Hi, Dios mio. Okay, let's get into the big stories in England. We had testing yesterday. We talked about it. It came out before the end of the show. Yes. 6 positive tests. Watford had 3 of the 6. More players for Watford are saying they are not going to train today. I haven't seen an update as of yet on that. Troy Deeney has the full backing of the club not to return to training. We talked about his comments yesterday. Has a 5-year-old son at home with respiratory issues. Completely understand his issues with it. I do, as we talked about yesterday, I think some of the information he's been given by the league and everybody associated with these protocols to return to play, it feels really disconnected. But Deeney has the backing of his club not to return. You have other players who are saying they won't train today. 19 of the 20 clubs were tested. Norwich did theirs yesterday, so we don't have their results yet. Burnley's assistant manager, Ian Wone, was one of the 6. He tested positive. The club said he's asymptomatic, safe, well at home. He's remaining in communication with club personnel. He is isolated from the club for 7 days. That's the deal that they have there. Wolves is one. Joe Edwards in the Express and Star, no positive tests in their group. They were starting small group training last night, up to 5. No contact permitted. Players can't eat at the training ground. They have to travel alone, take their kit home to wash. It's a step up from the individual training they were doing before. They did their tests on Sunday using a drive-through testing center at the training ground. That's where things stand in the Premier League as of this morning in terms of the testing side of things. I know a couple players, there are rumors that this guy tested positive, this guy didn't. There's different things with that. But the league said they weren't going to release the names of who tested positive. If the clubs want to mention it like Ian Wone, that's on them. But the Premier League is not going to issue that.
Do you want my BBC story for the morning, even though it is a bit of a kicker?
Go ahead.
All right. So, have you ever, and I imagine that the answer to this particular question, I know what the answer is going to be. Okay. Have you ever wanted to watch a match with Marcelo Bielsa?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now you can. Kind of.
Okay.
A Leeds United fan is conducting an online raffle with the first prize being Marcelo Bielsa.
He's a prize?
In sculpture form.
Okay.
The guy has created a bronzed replica, a life-size replica bronze statue of Marcelo Bielsa. It's made of brass, weighs 75 kilos, which is 165 pounds. And he is in his trademark position of sitting on a bucket. And even though you could separate the Bielsa statue from the bucket should you see fit.
He sits on a cooler sometimes, too. It's not always a bucket.
Okay, so this particular statue has a bucket as the added element to it. So Tony Clark, a survivor of the 2002 terrorist attacks in Bali, which killed 202 people, is hoping to raise £20,000 for the mental health charity Mind. And so he said that Leeds United have been a savior for me. I think people are realizing how much their club means to them now that the games have been taken away. I think that mental health is getting missed off at the moment, so I'd like to bring attention to the charity. Anyone who gives £10 or more on the donation page will receive entry into the raffle with the draw scheduled to take place on the 1st of July.
Okay. Very cool.
So that's my BBC story of the morning.
That's an interesting one there, John.
But like I said, it was a bit of a kicker. We do have Joe Johnston this morning. He had a question for us as we were talking about leagues and things. And so Joe on Twitter this morning, he asked, and I'm trying to scroll back into the timeline to grab it real quick. He says, okay, if you were to make a hierarchy of the current major soccer leagues in the world, who's in the best shape and who's in the worst shape financially and otherwise? What order would you rank the leagues in closest to returning outside, of course, of the ones that already have? So I guess it's a two-part question.
I'm gonna twist the first part of it just a little bit, and I hope this satisfies Joe. It's a little bit of the financial side, but also the level. I mean, I don't want to say that Costa Rica is going to have the least amount of impact from this, so they're at the number one spot in the world. They're not. It's not that strong of a league. Germany is one that I think will handle this really well, not just because they got back on the field quickly, but because they are a league that has been, I think, a little smarter in the way they manage the financials. So Germany will have an opportunity to take advantage of elements of this. I don't know beyond that. England has the probably largest number of clubs that have the financial strength to handle this, so they'll be okay. Others won't be. I think the Premier League, because of their TV money, and TV money will be affected the least in terms of revenue, they should be right there with Germany, maybe even higher. I think it'll be right there with them. Spain is going to take a massive hit because Barcelona is going to take a massive hit, and that's one of their big clubs, and they don't really have other big clubs outside of Real Madrid and, to a lesser extent, Atletico Madrid. Italy is a wild card because I feel like this was a good year in Serie A with Inter, with Lazio starting to push, other clubs starting to push Juve, but, how is it going to look coming out of this? They've also been hit the hardest with this, maybe outside of the UK, in Europe, so we have to see how they deal with it. France is going to be further behind than they were before. Nobody else is going to make jumps, so I don't think it's dramatically changed. I would say that coming in, most people probably looked at the Premier League as the best league in the world. A lot of people had maybe La Liga second. I think it's going to be the Bundesliga second, Premier League first, maybe Italy third, and La Liga might fall all the way down to fourth because of whatever effects Barcelona has. So Barcelona and Tesco in the chat on Twitch has chimed in. They've got a lot of young talent that's out on loan. It's a big difference between being out on loan and putting that Barcelona shirt on, and I want to see how they handle it. They should have got these guys games earlier. That's where I'm worried about them. I think they're going to take a short-term hit on top of the financial hit that they're going to take in the short term, and that's going to be a lot. Then you start to look at it, well, what if Barcelona doesn't qualify for the Champions League? What if they only qualify for the Europa League? That's another huge hit. What if you have those knock-on effects? Are they going to be able to weather that? They don't have the rich owner who can just pump money in. That's the thing you have to understand about Barca. You have to run the club properly to get the best out of them. Their hit is going to take La Liga down with them a few notches, I think. So I worry about Spain taking the biggest hit and the Bundesliga maybe taking the biggest jump. And Italy is the one that could be a bit of the wild card in terms of maybe being in a position to leapfrog Italy. France isn't going to do anything, and I don't think there's anybody else who's going to do anything. You look in South America, would there be a league there that could have done it? Nobody's in position to. Brazil's having huge problems with the virus, and we'll see how that affects their leagues. Argentina, financially, the country's not in a position to deal with it. MLS is one that maybe could make a big jump because they're not going to have the massive hit. Could this accelerate their rise? Possibly. We'll see about Mexico as well, but the English language nature of MLS combined with the international appeal, because it's a league that is in a bunch of countries already, they could take a huge jump out of all of this. We'll just have to see if they manage it correctly.
Chiefs coach Steve is in this morning, and he asks, do you view it as likely or unlikely that the financial pressures of leagues become so great, scales begin to tip away from social responsibility?
Yeah. I mean, you ask that like it's a surprising question. When clubs don't have revenue, they can't spend revenue on non-essential things. And look, social programming is not essential to the club as a business. It's not. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. I think for a smaller club, like we've seen with Aberdeen, it's part of the fabric of the club. It's a little bit different, and you're not spending the same amounts. You're not also expecting to bring in the same amount, so you're able to manage that a little bit easier. For a mega club, it's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard. I mean, how can Barcelona do the community programming that Barcelona has been known to do when they can't make their payroll at the end of June? Right. I mean, that's the reality. And whenever you see these types of economic slowdowns, and we've never seen one like this in my lifetime, I think back to being at a nonprofit during the one at the end of the first decade of the 2000s. And grants dry up because the governments don't have the money to throw. Foundations, their giving goes down because their donors aren't giving. And then individual donations go down because people can't afford to give. So it's a byproduct of it. Clubs have to then find a way to be more creative in how they support community initiatives. It's not going to be just with money now because the money's not going to be there.
Katie wants to ask also, she wonders if the longer-term EPL global profile lowers because of the rather bungling restart. And she agrees the book's probably more like 5 or 7 years and sounded like you volunteered to write it.
Maybe. We'll see. It could be an interesting one because it's going to be fascinating to follow around the world, and I think a lot of the conversation has been country by country focused. And I just come across that Hammarby, which is one of the biggest clubs in Sweden, they're about to have to undergo massive pay cuts because everybody's getting hit by this. Argentina has restructured their league. I don't know what the effect's going to be in Brazil. I don't know what the effect's going to be in Mexico. So those leagues need to be part of this conversation too. And I think right now there's a lot of focus on the major European leagues. This is going to affect the game around the world as a whole. And that story does need to be told. Tesco with a point about Manchester City and talking about the Premier League. If the ban on European competition is upheld, you're going to see players leave. Yes. That's going to potentially knock them down a rung or two, and that would be bad for the Premier League because then they really do need somebody to step up and be able to compete with Liverpool, because leagues that have a one dominant team, that erodes interest over time. It does. It's not as compelling before this season to watch the Italian league because you knew Juventus was going to win. It wasn't as compelling to watch the Bundesliga because you knew Bayern was going to win. Who cares about watching Ligue 1 because you know PSG is going to win?
Yep.
Even La Liga suffered from this because you had two. It was the compelling games were Barcelona, Real Madrid, until Atleti kind of stepped up and became a challenger. But then still it's three. If it's just Liverpool at that point, that's going to hurt the Premier League's interest. If they start running away with league after league after league, Liverpool fans will be happy, but that's not the whole league. It will hurt the league over time. It absolutely will. I wonder, and I think it's too early to tell, just the whole debate around everything and how much that's going to affect the public perception of the Premier League. Right now, it's not. If they don't come back and play because of all this, it will. But I think they will come back and play. The money's too big for them to not come back and play. But when you're getting some of the elements that we're getting out of this, Serge Aurier has been busted again for another lockdown breach. Yep. Somebody tweeted out, and I mean, this is accurate, sadly, that, and this is from, I want to give proper credit, and of course it doesn't want to come up. They might have deleted it because it was a really harsh one. Richard Jolly, who is a journalist, said that Serge Aurier has more lockdown breaches than games when Tottenham has kept a clean sheet in 2020. 3 lockdown breaches. We didn't see that out of players in Germany across the board. We haven't seen it in other countries, and that's a huge negative. We also haven't heard some of the other comments that have been said around this. Danny Rose, Newcastle, said that players are being treated like lab rats. He branded initial non-contact training sessions as an experiment. He said, "Is it worth the hassle? I could be potentially risking my health for people's entertainment, and that's not something I want to be involved in." We've talked about this from the beginning. The players who are going to participate in this, there are players. Troy Deeney obviously has a very personal decision for why he is not coming back to training. He has a child with respiratory issues. Doesn't want to take any risk there. Totally understand it. But these players are going to be, if the protocols are followed and are vetted, They're going to be tested more than your average person. They are going to be participating in an environment that is safer than the average person deals with at an office space, at a factory, at going to a store, et cetera, et cetera. I don't remember anybody saying the kind of things that we've heard from Danny Rose in other countries around the world. There is a communication breakdown. If Danny Rose is feeling that way, I don't think Danny Rose is an unreasonable person. But if he is feeling that way, there's a reason for it. He is not being told everything that is being done to do this. I would assume. Maybe he's just not buying it. That's possible too. But you're getting tested twice a week. You are going through all of these protocols. And is it an experiment? I think that's a harsh way to look at it. Is it a way to establish protocol? Yeah. But when you have, and this is where my frustration is about England right now, when you have comments like this, comments that Troy Deeney made that didn't fit his initial concern. His initial concern I'm totally on board with. And if the club's good with it, nobody should question it. But you have a lot of misinformation coming from players, a lot of just a lack of education on what is going on to make it safe for them to play. That's down to the league. That's down to whoever is having these conversations. It's down to the PFA. We didn't see this in any other country yet to this degree. And when you have that combined with Callum Hudson-Odoi, with Serge Aurier, our previous twits of the day, you have a lot of people who, it kind of reminds me of the baseball conversation here, and maybe that is where your comparison is, because I've just seen it so many times from baseball people that, well, if we can't spit sunflower seeds, then we can't play. Get over yourself. If we have to worry about spitting on the field, it's just such a part of the game. Where is spitting part of the game? I kind of missed that. I thought there was this ball that you threw to a catcher and somebody's trying to hit it and everybody else is trying to catch it. I missed the spitting part. Idiots. And if you're coming up with excuses not to play, that's fine. But you can't do that and then say the other things about the good of the game, about hoping that the clubs are doing okay, the teams are doing okay, the financials, brushing that aside, brushing any ask for a pay cut aside, all these types of elements. Look, it's all combined. It is all combined. There's just no way around it anymore. That has to be talked about. Clubs need to get back on the field to make any kind of money, period. Period. Because if they don't, clubs are going to go out of business. It is that simple. And you're getting a level of disconnect in England that is on the league. The league is not doing its job in getting things to the players, explaining things to the players. It's been bungled all the way around. That's a good word to use, Katie. It's been bungled all the way around. Government, league, administrations, all of it. And it's a problem. In Germany, and Tesco points it out, and our friend Bernd Dursberger has been telling us about all this, and it's been in the German press, there was so much communication early on. Tesco says that the players were put in touch with their personal doctors frequently, team doctors, to make sure every concern was addressed. Troy Deeney brought forward concerns and didn't get any answers, and it sounds like there was no follow-up. Danny Rose is looking at it like it's an experiment, like they're a lab rat. That's crazy, because they're being protected by a protocol that's in place that they don't seem to understand what the reasoning is. And that's a huge issue. It's the whole thing we've talked about with this idea that, well, you can't social distance and play a sport. Well, nobody's asking you to, because you have a level of testing that is protecting you from that. You're being told to social distance at a grocery store because people aren't being tested before they're allowed to go in the store. People are being tested before they're allowed to train, before they're allowed to play. Now, of course, people have pointed at this. Prenetics is doing the testing in the Premier League. their chief exec, Avi Lasserow, he said that approximately 98.8% of the tests are accurate. That's in line with those conducted by the National Health Service. So out of every 800, which is about what they did in the first round of testing, an average of nearly 10 tests would return false negatives or positives. If you start to run samples twice within the same window, within the same week, obviously the accuracy is enhanced even further. The chances of a single person returning inaccurate results twice in the same week is nearly 7,000 to 1. No test is going to be perfect. I think we all understand that. But that's a level of accuracy that I would think people can accept. Now, one issue is it takes 48 hours for the results to come back. That does give you a little bit of a window in terms of training while you tested positive. That does. But again, as we have seen, and this is where Troy Deeney's concern I totally understand. That's enough of a window for him to have serious concern about bringing that home to his son who has respiratory issues. Got it. Club understands it too. Everybody's good. Whoa, what in the world is going
on? In addition to the electrician, we have the grounds crew out back.
Yeah, good times. The other element of this is that 48 hours, yes, that does present an issue. Deeney, this is where his concerns are accurate. Others, I feel like the argument there and possibly in baseball, and we haven't seen it yet in other sports, is you're arguing for reasons not to come back. And if you're doing that, I think you have to accept then that by not coming back, you are potentially putting your employer's existence at risk. And it's not to say that you should come back because of that. The employer has to do everything to make it safe for you to come back. And in certain circumstances, that's not going to be safe enough. And that is 100% okay. And employers should work with those players. But in general, the conversation, not every player is Troy Deeney with a 5-month-old son at home with respiratory issues. I don't think because you have one player with that issue that everything should shut down. It's a question. I mean, okay, this is from Mike. Mike's on the media call right now with players that are available from Atlanta United. On his biggest question about the MLS Orlando plan, Brad Gazan says, what happens if someone tests positive? The thought that one person testing positive throws it all out the window might still be lingering. That's from Turner Kirby. And we're going to be able to get Mike on the line right now to follow up on that. So
far out.
Hang tight with us. He is available now. We're bringing Mike into the call. Make sure you're following him, Mike Conti 929 on Twitter. And Mike, this is perfect timing. We were just talking about the Brad Gazan answer that you tweeted out. Turner Kirby shared it with us. You want to tell us a little bit more about the media availability this morning?
Yeah, so Brooks Lennon and Brad Guzan have both joined the team. They were not with the team until Monday. We learned that. So they now have joined the team. And naturally, with Brad Guzan taking a leadership role with the Players Union, not necessarily being one of the player reps right now, but someone who is a leader within the Players Union. He got a lot of questions about this Orlando proposal. Brooks Lennon let it slip, by the way, that the league has proposed other sites than Orlando. I don't know if he meant to say that, but he said it. Everything that I have read, I think everything that we are hearing, everything that Darren Eales has said on the radio the last 2 weeks, indicates that the league really is zeroed in on Orlando. So I don't want to give anyone false hope that they would be potentially doing this in some place other than Orlando. I got the feeling in the context that Brooks Lennon said it, that there were initial proposals for other cities and that, it turned out Orlando was the winner. But anyhow, there are major concerns being voiced by, to a lesser extent, Brooks, but really more Brad Guzan about this Orlando proposal. And I cannot believe this would even have been seriously talked about, but I get the sense from what Brad Guzan was saying that one of the initial proposals was, in fact, to play the entire season in Orlando and sequester players for 6 months.
Right.
It sounds like that has been backed off of, that there would be a limited amount of games down there, and then the season would continue in home markets. That's the sense I got. But Brad Guzan said that there's a substantial amount of safety questions that are unanswered. The league has not made it clear to them what would happen if someone tested positive. He said it would be insane to relocate players away from their families for that long. One of the reporters on the call had said that it was his understanding that players would be allowed to go, and Guzan challenged and said, have you seen the proposal? Indicating that, in fact, players are not going to be allowed to bring their families. So anyhow, it's a mess. There's a lot of questions. Guzan said they are in ongoing talks with the owners. He and Brooks Lennon both brought up major concerns about an aggressive timetable to get matches restarted, which now, according to some reporting, could be down to a 2-week window. And both Brooks Lennon and Brad Guzan voiced some major concerns about that.
Where's that reporting been about a 2-week window? I haven't seen that.
It was brought up in questioning to the two players today, and I'm going to assume that is based on, I don't know if it was a Jeff Carlisle report. Mm-mm. Someone had reported, it might have been Carlisle, might have been Stephen Goff, I don't know, and I apologize for this, that
no.
because the negotiations are slowing down, that now June 8th would be the start date for camps in Orlando, with matches starting on June 21st.
Okay, I think, and that's what's hard about all this, because everybody's getting things second and third and fourth hand. I remember the initial part of it was that June 21st, 22nd was going to be the first date. You were going to have a week of individual training, a week of group, a week of full team. Then it sounded like, according to, and I'm just about positive, it was Stejkal at The Athletic, who said that he had gotten updated information that it would be 2 weeks of full team training, first games the beginning of July. I think maybe it's combining a couple of different elements of the reporting that's bounced around a little bit. 2 weeks would be insane. That's not happening. Yeah. There's no way.
Well, and I don't know what the basis for this 2 weeks question was. It came from a reporter that we all know and respect a great deal. And I think, I don't know if he was trying to use an example from Europe or something like that. I don't know. 2 weeks seemed to be
way too short.
A key phrase in all. And of course, that's way too aggressive. Of course. As Brad Guzan said today, he knows of 2 markets where teams aren't even allowed to train yet.
I think it's still 7, right?
Yeah, remember, New York would be a market with 2 teams.
Right.
But, it's my understanding that the 2 New York teams, Montreal, New England, San Jose, and 2 others that I can't remember off the top of my head, are not yet, DC is one of them.
Chicago, I think is the other.
Yeah. Chicago, thank you, are not yet even able to do individual training.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the reason why this whole Orlando thing is being done right now. I just, and I brought this up the other day, and this is something we can get into later on Stoppage Time. I don't want to derail your show. I'm beginning to wonder now if we all should just take a deep breath, relax, and hold on here and not ram this Orlando thing down everyone's throats, because you're seeing governors now, even in hardline states like California and New York, saying, we'll allow professional sports. It won't be with fans, but we'll allow it. That just, to me, seems to be a much more humane, palatable solution where, you might have to do a form of sequestration, but at least you're doing it in your home market, as opposed to making everyone move to Orlando and stay under one roof for a couple months. And I don't know if that's a development. What came out of New York and California on Monday, I don't know if that is a development that the league was anticipating.
Probably not.
To me, that feels like that's a game changer. in this whole conversation. But it sounds like the Orlando thing is very advanced right now. And I again wonder if it has become advanced because the league is seeing a way to monetize things here with a startup tournament that could be televised by ESPN. I get all the economic arguments about it, but it sounds like, and this is something that has been reported widely, it sounds like the players and the league still have a lot of work to do to get everyone comfortable with this. And Brad Guzan brought up that, there are probably a lot of players who aren't all that concerned about doing this because they feel comfortable with the safety protocols that are in place, but there are other players who have situations at home that are not going to feel safe. And you have to deal with that. And you have to make those players whole and make it right with them. So it's an extremely complicated issue that, the more and more I have thought about it and the more and more I've read about it, I'm disappointed that this would be the best way to restart the season, especially seeing what they've done in Germany and what they might be about to do in England.
Let's work through this real quick, because I think we're maybe jumping to some conclusions as to why we've gotten to this point. Let's work backwards. So
okay. Right
now we've got 26 teams in the league, and we have 7 that still can't train in their market, period. And how many? 3 came online the beginning of this week? So
yes.
It was 10
LA
last week.
Philadelphia and Seattle, yes.
And Philly is in a different state than normal. So
it's
not far, I know.
Yeah,
well, I was going to say Delaware is a 5-minute drive from their normal training ground. But yes, they did have to go to another state. You are correct.
So at the beginning of the week, it was more than a third of the league that couldn't train individually. And I would assume this plan, we've been hearing about Orlando for over a week now.
At least a week, yeah.
Yeah, I think it maybe 10 days. When we heard about it, I don't think that was when it was created. So let's say it was created 2-3 weeks ago, when you had very few teams training in their own market. I think that's why it was created. I think anything else is a bonus. I think, honestly, it was created to try to find a way to return. But you're dead on when you say that the landscape's changed. I didn't expect California and New York to be so aggressive in saying, we want pro sports to come back, we'll help facilitate, we'll figure it out. Even though they left New York City off of the graphic, which was kind of sad. But it's gonna be tough no matter which way you go. I think we can all understand that. And you're gonna have to figure out how to balance training with, I don't know the landscape in Chicago, New England. It sounds like New York could probably get it worked out pretty quick. San Jose, maybe they'll get it worked out pretty quick, but maybe the local side won't. That's the number one concern for me, is when can you get everybody training first, even individual training. Then you've still got to progress to group, and you've still got to progress to team. Along the way, and this is something that I think in Germany maybe has been left out of some of the conversation. The plan didn't come fully formed. The plan didn't show up and then everybody said, yep, and then they just did everything dead on from day one. It evolved. Every few days you'd have something change, or you'd have a different agency say, well, what about this? And you'd have to add something to it and keep working with everybody. We've talked about the disconnect in a lot of leagues. In MLS, it sounds like there's a disconnect because you don't have the plan finalized. Maybe not as bad as like we're seeing in England, but you don't have a plan that everybody has agreed to yet. And the landscape is changing dramatically while the plan's being created. So I'm kind of with you in that I understand why they created this, and I think at the time they were creating it, it's probably the right play. It might not be the right play in a month. They might be able to train fully in almost every market, and in the cases where they can't, maybe they do work out a training camp for those teams. But maybe in 2 months, they would be able to play games in market, behind closed doors, but in market where you take that travel and being away from the families out. It's going to take longer than you could play in Orlando, but maybe not much longer as they thought it would when they started doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're at the point now, and again, like I don't want to read the political tea leaves with governors and mayors and
there's no way to know.
Public health officials. I mean, there's no way to know. You're right, Jay. I mean, if you would have told me this time last week that the governors of California and New York would open up their states to pro sports, I would have thought there's no chance of that happening. Now clearly the landscape has changed. And by the way, I don't think anyone was realistically expecting fans anywhere for anything through at least the end of this summer. Yeah. I don't think that has changed. But what I'm hoping is that I think a lot of times and we can relate to this in our day-to-day lives, we aren't running sports leagues, but it's like planning a wedding, okay? And let's say you're planning to get married on the 4th of July. And you wanted to get married at a certain venue, this hotel that was beautiful and in your price range and close to home and close to the airport so everyone could fly in for it. And you find out that the hotel is booked. So now you find another hotel that's a little less convenient, a little further away, a little more expensive, but you've already hired the caterer, the photographer, and you've gotten the cake. And now you find out the original venue could be back open. You know, a lot of times you've mentally gone so far down the road of planning for the alternate that you can't unplug from that and go back to the original. And I just hope that we aren't at that point in MLS where
I don't see why there would be.
Well,
you don't have a plan done. I mean, the players haven't bought in, so
no. I get that, but I go back to this. If you were looking at this tournament as a separate entity that could be monetized separately from a regular season match, from a broadcast standpoint, a sponsorship standpoint, maybe even getting a title sponsor. And those dollars were contingent on playing a neutral site tournament over X amount of weeks on X amount of networks. I'm wondering if there might be concern that you could be walking away from money that you're not going to make in an empty stadium.
Oh, there could
and that's
be.
The speculation.
Absolutely, yeah, it is, and you could be, but you can't do that if the players don't buy in. So
I agree. Yeah,
you know, I mean, it's hard when negotiations go public because we don't know all the details. You know, with all this, I mean, some leagues handle it better than others. It didn't feel like we had as much of the soap opera elements in Germany that we're seeing in England in terms of the negotiations, and maybe what we're starting to see a little bit here, although it's not. It doesn't feel as contentious.
And I think the what I have picked up on from everyone who has spoken from the player side is they all do want to play.
Yeah, that feels different. You know, I think it's just how.
Yeah,
you play.
I don't think you can say that about England.
I don't know if you can say that about Major League Baseball either. Like, it feels like there's more pushback in MLB than in MLS.
Yeah. And you have to remember, too, I mean, and Brad Guzan's a smart guy. You know, sometimes you drop carrots to the media, you drop carrots in public that could potentially provide some leverage in your negotiation. Mm-hmm. I don't get the feeling that there's an impasse or that, you know, there's no hope. It's a hopeless situation. I mean, you saw the report in ESPN that the players are talking about deferred compensation and giving quite a bit of money back. Like, there seems to be, unlike Major League Baseball, there seems to be that concession from the players. I mean, we get it. We're going to have to give money back and maybe push the start of the CBA to 2021. So, like, I don't think this is a hopeless situation by any stretch. But I just think, and I'm going to say it again, we're going to talk a lot about this afternoon. I just think things have evolved too unexpectedly and too much over the last, really, 72 hours to just proceed blindly into an Orlando plan and not maybe reassess. And look, you know, the governor of Pennsylvania is taking a very hard line right now. I know Illinois, they're having some some issues with that as well. It might be better to deal with the 2 or 3 clubs that are going to be affected rather than moving 26 clubs into sequestration. And I think, again, maybe it's worth waiting another week or two to see how things continue to evolve in Germany. Have they been able to keep the health aspect of what they're doing over there under control? Now, players are still sequestered over there, but they're being sequestered in their home markets.
They're not being sequestered. They were
so
for the first week.
Home?
For the first week, they were sequestered in a hotel. They're not now. They're at home because a big part of it, and this is going to be the trade-off. And this is whether it's England, MLS, any league around the world, if you are not going to do the bubble idea, then you're going to have a lot of personal responsibility and a lot of things that you're going to be asked to do that you have to do at home. And in Germany, I mean, it's down to the point, like, don't hang out with your neighbors. Don't, have people over. Don't go out on a regular basis to restaurants. Like, don't do things that invite risk. And that's the trade-off. And that's what it'll have to be. It can't be what we're seeing in England with too many players who are breaking their lockdown and having parties with Instagram models and having Red Solo Cup parties at home. They're at home, yeah, but they're doing things that are inviting risk to their team. You're going to have that trade-off, and it's absolutely doable, as we're seeing in Germany. It's doable. It's not foolproof, but it's doable. And that's going to be the trade-off if you don't go and be sequestered somewhere away from home.
Yeah, and I think, again, like it's very important to point out, because this has been, I think, completely misunderstood by some people. The Orlando thing is not going to replace the season. It's now sounding like that might have been on the table at one point. But if
it would have been longer, yeah.
But Brad Guzan said that this is not going to replace the season. No. And I think that's really, really important. But again, I think even if you're asking players to spend 10 weeks down there, I mean, that's more than a World Cup training camp / tournament. I mean, it's close if you go all the way, I guess.
Yeah, it's close.
But at a World Cup, you probably have your family over there, maybe not staying with you, but at least over there.
Right.
Certainly not a situation where, they're in a foreign country affected by a pandemic where they may not be able to speak the language and you have kids to take care of and everything like that. So they'll get this worked out. I mean, Guzan said he thinks they're going to have a season. Brooks Lennon said they want to have a season. So, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt we're going to get a season restart at some point. I think what you saw yesterday, the cancellation of Campeones Cup and Leagues Cup and the All-Star match kind of proves that. I mean, they're trying to open up the calendar as much as possible. We're talking about fixtures that were set for late July going into August. They're trying to clear the calendar as much as possible to get as many league matches played as possible. And I still really believe we're going to have matches played in home markets this year. It sounds like to summarize, what they've got to hammer out is they've got to find a way to have a long enough training camp where players feel like they aren't being rushed back and put at risk of injury. Obviously, they have to address the safety concerns dealing with the virus. And then they have to address this issue of how much are you going to ask the players to be away from their families. And these are not questions that can be answered in 5 minutes. But again, I'll say it for the third time now, I just think too much has changed in the last 3 days, where it would feel responsible to go back to square one on these plans and maybe keep the concept in place, but amend accordingly. Maybe you don't need to have teams go down to Florida as early as you thought, because it would be possible for teams to do a little bit more in their home markets. And those who are unable to do things in their home markets, you move them to Florida faster. I don't know. But the situation is moving too quickly and evolving too fast, where I would hate to see people being rushed into very unpleasant things when it's avoidable.
Yeah.
Well, and
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Mike, that I think that the key traditionally here is that you have to be proactive instead of reactive, like we've seen in Germany versus England. I think that you have to keep all of your lines of communication open this entire time, which was what we've seen with MLS. Mm-hmm. And you have to be flexible. The bottom line is that you have to understand, like we've seen in the last week, where you've had large states open themselves up and want to get things back up and running under controlled environments. I think that those are the key things here, and we're seeing that with MLS, where we're not seeing it in other larger countries overseas.
Yeah, and again, like the thing I really appreciate about what Don Garber is doing is he's fighting to get a season in. It would have been very, very easy to just throw up a white flag a month ago and say it's not worth it. There's no way to get this done. We'll come back in 2021. I mean, I really do appreciate the fact that they're trying to get a season in, knowing they're going to lose money on it. I really appreciate the mentality of the players for wanting to play. Obviously, with concerns about safety still in mind, but they want to play. I really do appreciate that. So, like, I think the foundation of where we are today is still pretty good. I mean, everyone wants to play, and we're trying to come up with ways to play. All very good things. We cannot say this about a lot of other places in the world right now. But there's still a really long way to go. And I kind of feel like now that we may be slightly further away from a restart now than maybe we were last week. Just because it felt like this time last week there was like clear momentum that, okay, no one really loves the idea, but we're going to go to Orlando for 8 weeks, and that's just the way it is. And now I think with all these new questions that are being raised and the changing lockdown landscape that we're having around the country, that it's throwing a whole new set of factors in play that may slow this down a little bit. But if you have to slow things down by a week or two to get it right, then I think that's totally fine. It's totally worth it.
Yeah, I really wonder how much we really know about what's going on with us. I don't think these plans have been from day one written in concrete. I think they've all been fluid. When Carlisle and Stejskal and Tenorio all started reporting it sounded like they were hearing a lot of the same stuff from the same people, and maybe not the full breadth of it. I do think the most important thing is that if we work backwards to when the plan would have been created and initially proposed, and like Brad said, at that point it was to do the whole season in that way, which Major League Baseball talked about, which other leagues had talked about, England talked about, to do something in a bubble environment. Starting from then until now, we're in a dramatically different place. Right. I think the one thing that MLS has going in the right direction is I haven't heard any pushback on the protocols that teams are using to train right now individually. No. It's actually been positive. I know Atlanta United players have given positive quotes about they feel safe, they feel like all these things are being done to help them be safe, to help them feel safe. They're good with what they have to do to train right now. Now, I haven't heard any pushback about a group training session yet, and I haven't heard anything about that around MLS yet. I know Alejandro Bedoya spoke about the individual training, and he was happy too. Yeah. That's going to be the next step.
By the way, neither is Brooks Lennon. He says they've got no guidance on when group training would start and what it would look like.
Yeah, I think, and maybe I'm guessing. This is speculation on my part, so I want to make that clear. I don't think the protocols change. I don't think you're not doing anything differently when you arrive. You're not doing anything differently with water bottles. All that's the same. They don't know when it's going to start because it's probably tied to the teams that can't train individually right now and whatever their return to play is. So I get that there's no date yet and what that looks like. And I don't think anything would change. I guess the biggest questions would be, are you going to go straight into contact training at that point? Or as we've seen some leagues do, small group, no contact. as the first step of more than just individual training. I don't know if there's a best practice there yet. I think everybody's kind of figured that out as they go. But I think they've got the protocols right. And that was, for me, that was the most important thing. So now you've got teams that know how to do a training session. Even though it's individual, even though it's that part, you know how to handle arrival, equipment, fluids, like all that stuff is known and being done. Now you have to figure out what it's going to look like to play games. And then you can work towards the middle of the training to get ready to play games. And you're right. The landscape from when this conversation started to now is dramatically different. And I don't think anybody predicted that we would be in the place we are with states reopening and with governors and mayors being so receptive to having teams be back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And in one way, it's very exciting. But in another way, I think even the NBA is probably a little bit shocked, to be honest with you. Yeah. And you've not, you kind of get the sense that the NBA is close to making a decision now that there seems to be widespread support among the players to restarting the season. But, it's one thing for the NBA to go into a bubble. They only have about 15 regular season games and the postseason to play. That bubble could be popped in 2 months and everyone goes home. MLS being so early in its season, it's just a completely different conversation. Completely different. To your point, Jason, you brought up a really good point. We've seen the ideas evolve substantially in Major League Baseball, where the idea was to go into bubbles. There was widespread pushback among the players. So, okay, now we're going to amend the plan and maybe do 3 10-teams division. And then there was pushback on that. So now we're going to keep the divisions, but everyone's going to play geographically within their own division. And by the way, that's something that MLS could still do. Mm-hmm. MLS could say, all right, we're going to come back July 4th and we're going to play 26 regular season matches all against your conference. You can do that too. So I feel like every time we sign off stoppage time, and I only bring that up because we do it once a week, I feel like we always say, all right, so here's all that's changed in the last 7 days. Who knows where we're going to be 7 days from now? And I feel like we're dramatically in that position now in American sports. And if the Bundesliga continues to run smoothly and cleanly, I think that's just going to ratchet up the not pressure, but the need to get started even more, because Germany has set a blueprint that appears to be working. I say appears, we don't know for sure, but appears to be working. And that model and what they're doing is being studied extremely closely by the major sports leagues in this country. So, as long as we continue to have incident-free Bundesliga and NASCAR and golf and UFC and everything else that's up and running right now, there's going to be less and less of a reason to not resume the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball, and, of course, Major League Soccer.
Yeah, the questions are going to be logistics. That's it.
That's the thing, and just being flexible with everything going forward.
Yeah, and by the way, like the whole reason why I think that what Stetchkal and Carlisle and Stephen Goff have reported it has been pretty much dead on is just in the context clues I get from Darren's interviews each week with Mike and Carl, where, like Darren said this time last week, the venues that have been reported on are pretty set by the league. Last night, Darren said that he's going to go into sequestration with his players off-site as a show of solidarity because he didn't think it would be fair to ask the players to be away from their families that long, and he would sit at home with his family. So Darren's comments are lining up with the reports. Yep. That's why I think what's been reported, it might not be 100% accurate, but I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, no, I want to make it clear. I wasn't saying that it's not accurate. I'm saying that it's evolving as it goes.
Right.
Like it's a snapshot of where it was at that time. Are they? I don't think there's any question that they are looking at some form of a return to play in Orlando. I don't think there was any question about it being for an extended period of time. I think when they started coming up with that, you didn't have as many options on the table. Now that table has gotten bigger, and you've got more possibilities for returning to play. And like you said, maybe waiting a little bit longer to see if the landscape changes even more is worthwhile, to where you're not having to make that big ask and take a huge expense. I mean, it's not going to be cheap to have everybody in Orlando to do that.
No doubt. I mean, again, I kind of am getting the feeling, without being told, but just reading between the lines, that they would probably just send the bill to ESPN.
Possibly, but who knows?
I don't know that, though. I don't.
Yeah.
And my wife works in the hotel industry, and she was running the numbers for me. I mean, the bill for staying in a resort for 10 weeks with the food and everything else that goes with it. I mean, you're talking about a bill that would be in the millions of dollars, if not tens of millions of dollars. So it would be substantially expensive.
See, and that's where I'm at with. I don't think this would be a money maker for MLS.
Yeah,
I want to make that point clear. If it's tens of millions of dollars to do it, the cost of doing this, and that's not. I mean, whatever kind of rental fee for fields and then equipment to televise and all that kind of stuff. So tens of millions of dollars. I don't think ESPN's paying tens of millions of dollars and then a rights fee on top.
No, I agree.
Yeah, so you might be able to wait it out and not have more of a financial hit because that landscape's changing, but you might need elements of the plan because you might have some teams that can't train in their market and can't play in their market.
I mean, I think, look, I mean, the way plans have evolved to today, and this could all change between now and Friday.
It could all change between now and 2 o'clock.
If it were me, okay, if you have 7 teams that can't train in their home markets, you move those 7 teams to Disney World, training camp for a month, and then those 7 teams play round robin and the games count. For everyone else, you keep them at their home facilities, then those teams play round robin where they're going into home markets and those games count. And then hopefully when you're done with that period, whether it be, I'd say 6 weeks, probably a little longer, then you hope that everyone is in position to go back to their home markets. But if they aren't, then you make accommodations for the affected teams. That's something that I think you could do.
Yeah.
I really think you could do it. And I think there's a way you could do it where you could minimize travel. Where, all right, I mean, if the New York teams and New England and Chicago and D.C., and I'm leaving someone out, if they're in the
Montreal.
Okay, if they're on the island of Misfit Toys, where they aren't allowed to train locally, and they go to Disney World, then schedule a round robin pod with Atlanta, Miami, Orlando, Nashville, and the Texas teams, and then no one's flying more than 2 hours anywhere. Heck, that could even introduce the possibility of day of game travel, which is something you're even hearing in the NFL right now. Yeah. Where you don't have to deal with putting people up in a hotel and the complications of everything that entails. You fly in the morning of the game, you play that night, you go straight home on a charter. That might be safer than putting 3,000 people under the same roof at Disney World. I don't know. But
safer
I think,
and more cost effective, and that's going to be part of the conversation too.
Right. One would think that'd be a lot more cost effective. So, I mean, these are the things that we need to look at. And maybe, I mean, heck, maybe you're even talking about restarting the season the first month where, as best as you possibly can, you're scheduling fixtures where teams can bus. Where maybe it's Atlanta, Nashville, and Cincinnati all in a pod, and you're busing. I mean, that wouldn't be fun, obviously, but it's even less expensive than air travel. An Atlanta-Nashville fixture, you play home and home. You've already played the road leg if you're Orlando. You bus in Nashville on a Saturday morning, you play Saturday night, you go home. There are, I think, a lot of situations around the league where you can accomplish that. Not everywhere, obviously, but many places. And then you just go from there and let things open up and let things evolve. But what do I know?
We're all trying to figure it out. I mean, the league is too. The players are too.
Yeah.
Like, we're all in the same boat.
It's not easy, and I really hope. Like, I kind of feel bad. I'm probably sounding a little bit harsh and a little bit critical about how we've gotten to this point, because I'm not thrilled with this Orlando idea. I think I've said that a couple times, but I do respect the fact that this is very, very tricky. Very, very tricky. And the logistics have got to be next to impossible to work out. And I have so much admiration and appreciation for everyone with the league, the Players Association, the clubs that are trying to figure out a way to get this season started. So I'm just hoping we can make it better, but I definitely appreciate the work that's been done.
I think when the Orlando plan was created, it was probably the best option on the table.
At the time,
and
yes.
Maybe it's different now, and we'll have to see what that looks like. Well, we got stoppage time at 2:00, so we'll have another hour to jump into this.
Yeah, you'll keep workshopping this at 2.
Yeah, well, we'll have a lot of questions too, because I'm imagining that more teams training, more teams doing media availability, you'll get more comments like we saw from Brad and Brooks today. So 2:00, Facebook.com/929thegame.
I hope our listeners and our viewers are as passionate about this as we are, because there's a lot on the line for all of us who work in this league, and I want to see them get it right. So yeah, we'll do it 2:00 in the 929 The Game Facebook page. And sorry for making you guys run long today, but thanks for letting me spout off my nonsense about this.
We run long all the time, so we've still got some craziness with salary caps in Europe after all of this.
Oh, I got you. Well, I will hang up and listen.
First time, long time, love the show.
Talk to you later, Mike.
All right, bye.
All right, so let's run through what's left on the card at this point. So we mentioned Manchester City, and we mentioned that their appeal of their Champions League ban that starts next season will be heard early June. David Silva is preparing to sign a short-term contract extension because he's out of contract June 30th. He wants one last shot at winning Champions League with Manchester City. Whenever the season's over, he will leave, and reportedly interested in him are Al Sadd and Inter Miami. So take that with a grain of salt. Talk of the town reports that salary caps of £2.5 million for League One and £1.25 million for League Two have been reportedly proposed by the EFL. Telegraph is reporting that automatic points deductions will be put in place for clubs who fail to pay their players on time. Thank you. The caps would represent significant cuts at a number of clubs that are above that limit. I think they're going to have to cut regardless if there's a cap or not. The cap just makes them cut. Yep. Telegraph Sports also reporting that League One, League Two, there's a vote to reduce squad sizes. Just 20 senior players, that's players over the age of 21, per squad. 8 have to be homegrown players in those squads. These are big deals. These are not minor little things. These are big. All clubs would have a grace period of a season to comply with it. Clubs relegated from the championship would be allowed a transition period because it's such a huge gap, championship to League One. They need 75% majority to approve any plans like this. Rick Perry, EFL chief, is on record as saying, any model where wages are 106% of turnover is ridiculous. Ipswich, previous figures showed that wages accounted for 108% of clubs' turnover. That was when they were in the championship. They're lower now, but still. Their wage bill's understood to be around the £5 to £8 million mark. Reading, who was 14th in the championship, 226% wage to turnover ratio.
Yes, they are the leaders, I think, in the clubhouse for that particular number.
226%. You're going out of business.
Yeah.
I mean, just flat out, you're going out of business. Like, that doesn't work. The Guardian, Andy Hunter, had an article that I recommend you guys check out. We've talked about promotion and relegation. I think promotion generally needs to be upheld. Relegation should be stopped. That's my feeling. The promotion side of it, Harrogate, and I'm probably saying that wrong, but I don't know exactly how it would be said. They are second in the National League.
You got it right.
They're second right now in the National League. Barrow is the top of the National League. They're going to replace Bury, period. That's regardless of anything. You do have the possibility of no relegation from League 2. That would prevent Harrogate from going up. And when they talk about where they are, this is the important part of this. They're talking about building a new stand. They would get a grant to do that, but they have to get promoted to get the grant. That's £400,000 to get that. They don't want to do it unless they know they're going up, but they can't wait a whole lot longer to do it. They have to put a new pitch in as well. Players, they have to worry about as well. They said they planned ahead on player contracts. They had 4 players out of contract. One of them's re-signed. They had to release the other 3 via a Zoom call because that's where you're at right now. This is what jumped out to me. The price of promotion and of being denied it is stark to a club of Harrogate's size. They received £90,000 for being promoted to the National League. Promotion to the Football League, they're looking at around £1 million to go up, including that $400,000 grant. So $600,000 for just on the field. Forgive the pun, and this is from their CEO, it would be groundbreaking for us. Plus, we would have extra revenue from the capacity increase, more stand, more people buying tickets. Right now, there's nobody buying tickets. TV money would go up because there's no TV money in National League. There's a little bit in League 2. It's massive. It's a big decision. They really need to go up at this point. I don't know. Neil Doncaster has been talking. That's always dangerous.
Oh, no.
He has said that if Hearts file legal action against the SPFL, Neil Doncaster has made it clear that it would not be hurting the SPFL, it would be hurting the other 41 clubs. He said, any action that's taken by any member against the league ultimately is taken against members as a whole. We don't hold reserves year to year, so any action that any one individual club takes, effectively the burden of that would fall on all the other members. It's back to the same argument about the independent inquiry. It's like, well, we don't have the money to do that. And Rangers said they would pay for it. And it's like, well, now it's tainted because they're going to pay for it. It's the same thing. He's saying, like, oh, you want to sue us? You want to take legal action? You want to fight your relegation? Okay, cool. Everybody else is going to have to pay for it because we can't pay for it. It's the same argument. It's not really a strong argument in that you didn't do anything wrong. It's just an argument about trying to deflect. Holy. Italy. Yes. We haven't talked about Italy in a little while. The Minister of Sport, Vincenzo Spadafora, confirmed that the government has given the all-clear to Serie A clubs for group training. They agreed to the modified medical protocol. Remember, initially the protocol was player test positive, whole team goes into quarantine for 14 days. And clubs said, that's not realistic. It doesn't make any sense. That's been modified. Multiple sources last night said that the CTS, which is the Technical Scientific Committee panel of experts of the government, approved the new protocol, drawn up by the Association of Club Medics, Players Association, and others who will have to enact the protocol during contact training. They're going to ramp up the testing more than they had initially planned. According to La Repubblica, there will be 2 swabs in the first 24 hours, then another every 4 days, blood tests every 14 days. I don't know why the blood tests come into this. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The changes found common ground, as if a player does test positive, the individual will be quarantined while the rest of the group can continue to train with ramped-up testing. So this all but guarantees that teams can begin group training. To get to organizing matches, Spadafora said it does require keeping an eye on the overall curve in the country. So it's a step. It's not the step to scheduling games, but it is a step. We mentioned France earlier. Now, France has a whole nother issue to deal with because the French want to fight themselves and continue to do all of this madness because
I gotta hear this.
It's what they do. You know, it's France. It's how they handle these things, and you know.
France.
Mm-hmm.
France.
L'Équipe is reporting that there is the verge of a new crisis today about dividing up the Ligue 1 and second division TV rights deal. It's all packaged together. Yesterday afternoon, representatives from clubs in both divisions got the opportunity to speak before the board of directors of the league, General Assembly. That's going to happen today. They could not build a positive consensus about how the League Two rights would be sorted out. They haven't resolved this since May of 2018. The league got a deal from 2020 to 24 from Media Pro in 2018. They still haven't figured out how to divide all of it up, almost 2 years later. Okay. League Two clubs are not happy because right now the insistence is that the second division clubs will receive a maximum of 110 million euro per year. Right now, they are getting 99 million per year in the final installment of the previous TV deal. Okay, it's an increase. Yeah, that's cool. It's only 11 million euro increase. The increase of the overall package is 482.5 million euro. They're like, hey, that's a whole lot of more money that's coming in. We'd like a percentage of that. No. They want 12.4% of the new total deal. That would take them to 162 million euro once taxes and other things are taken out of the deal. Of that, League Two presidents are willing to then give out 7.5 million to sides relegated to the third tier, so a parachute payment down, and another 7.5 million, probably as a package, to clubs across that division to keep the third division strong. So the second division would cut 15 million euro out of the 162 that they're trying to get for parachute payments to relegated teams and to the third division as a whole to help them be solid. In exchange, and this is wild to me, League Two presidents are willing to allow for League One presidents to manage the overall entity on their own. So instead of League Two having as much of a say as they do now, they would say, no, first division, you guys run the whole thing, but we want this money now. That looks like desperation to me. I'm just saying. It does. For this to be enacted, all 40 clubs have to vote for it. So I think it has to be unanimous, which is crazy. 9 Ligue 1 presidents voted against it yesterday. And the majority of those are the biggest clubs. They're saying they don't have enough guarantees from the league about the 215 million euro loan that was obtained to cover the loss of TV rights fees from beIN Sports and Canal Plus, which came about with the season being ended by the government. So they haven't got the guarantees about that loan yet and how that's going to go. They want that before they can figure out they can give the second division more money. This is where it gets wild. The second division clubs...
Oh, wilder than what we've heard.
They feel betrayed by that decision, and they are potentially going to vote down accepting that government loan of 215 million euro to self-sabotage the league if they don't get their way, or boycott the General Assembly today entirely. They're going to vote down the loan from the government because they're not going to get their way when they're offering in the deal for the first division teams to run the whole combined league between the two, and the second division teams then get no more say. This is bonkers.
Yes.
This is crazy. So, the president of Guingamp, Bertrand Desplat, he says the meeting between Ligue 1 presidents did not allow for a consensus to form. We hope that in the days that come, good sense will prevail. 9 Ligue 1 clubs are engaged in blackmail. We are considering postponing the General Assembly. All right, France is trying to pass Scotland. They're working hard.
They are working hard.
They're going to turn down a government loan because they're not going to get their way. Amazing. Okay, Portugal. June 4th, planned restart date for the league. No craziness. Not too much yet, anyway. They're going to play games almost every day of the week. They got 90 games left, so they want to play from June 4th to July 26th. The first 2 rounds are going to be spaced out a little bit more because they want to ramp the fitness up. Now, the controversy in Portugal right now is that the title sponsor of the league, NOS, N-O-S, I don't know if it's pronounced differently, they're not renewing their contract, and it sounds like it's between some kind of personal dispute between the president of the league and the company. That's a 20 million euro a year minimum deal right now. So that is not going to be renewed. That's a problem for Portugal. Couple countries we have not heard from in soccer over there extended yet. Slovenia, their league is returning on June 5th. So Slovenia is getting back to play. And here you go in Cyprus. All right, the FA canceled the rest of the season. No shock. They're promoting the top 2 teams from the second division. They're not relegating anybody. Cyprus is a smart place. The top 2 teams, there is some controversy. The top 2 teams in the first division had the same amount of points. Only one of them gets to go into the Champions League. You're going into early qualification rounds, but only one goes. The team that's in second place, Anorthosis, they had a higher goal differential than the team in first place, Ammonia. The second place team asked for the first place team to play a game to see who got the Champions League spot. Of course, the team in first place said, no, we're not playing the game. We're good. Anorthosis has been in first place for most of the season. They dropped to second a week or two before the cancellation. Ammonia beat them in one of the 2 games that occurred between them. I guess it was a draw in the other. So head-to-head, the team that's in first has the better head-to-head record. They probably deserve to be in first. That seems legit. But no relegation. That's the key in Cyprus. Argentina is always crazy. They have to try to regain their crazy crown. The Superliga is dead. It is now called the Liga Profesional de Futbol. It's the same thing. Nothing's changed. They just changed the name. I guess it's a new company. Maybe they're trying to dodge some bills. I don't know. Same president, Marcelo Tinegi. He is the president of San Lorenzo, current president of the Superliga. He's still in that role with the Liga Profesional de Futbol. New name, new logo, same thing. Okay. And in Costa Rica, first game was played yesterday afternoon. Guadalupe and Limon. Protocol's really similar to what they do in Germany. It was played at Herediano's home ground. Substitutes were put in the stands. They weren't on the bench. They did do the 5 substitutions. 115 people allowed in the stadium. That's the way they did it. 18-man rosters for each team, 8 technical staff per team, 22 journalists and broadcasters, 27 staff from the 2 teams, the referees, 4 from the Red Cross, 4 security, 2 match commissioners. They got it done. More games today. The big one is on ESPN Deportes tonight, 10 o'clock, Saprissa and Herediano, and that's at Saprissa.
Yep. Saprissa, courtesy of our friends at Odds Portal, is at -101 to win. Let's see. Herediano's at +275 to win. Your draw option is at +229. 4 matches, 2 at 5 o'clock, 1 at 7:10, including our friends from San Carlos, and then the 1 at 10 o'clock tonight.
Well, your yard folks came over here, so they're outside
That's what
the
I heard.
window, so I apologize. But we get a little bit of this before we go. It's not the yard people. Football Italia is reporting the FIGC announces that Serie A playoffs and playouts will be allowed if the season is suspended again. Nick Alifi's thinking they're not going to be able to come back and play, finish the season out. And it's looking like they might try to pivot from returning to action but not finishing out the whole season, especially in some parts of the country, because that has been talked about. There was the idea that some clubs in some areas might not be able to play where others could, like we're seeing here. That might keep them from finishing the season, but they might go to a playoff tournament format for both the championship side of it at the top, but also the relegation side. So it's a way to complete the season in a shorter format, and probably in parts of the country that you could actually get the games in and be safe. So we'll see. The government, as Nick says, and I mean, I think it's obvious if you've paid attention to what's going on in Italy, they are very, very sensitive to reducing risk, and maybe even to the point that it's maybe a little overboard, but it's understandable there versus what's going on in Germany because it hasn't been the same effect. So what Italy's dealing with is what Italy's dealing with, and it's tough. And they might go to a playoff format. So keep that in mind. We could see some differences. They have been approved with protocols to come back to play, but they haven't set dates to come back to play. This could be what replaces coming back to finish the season.
A couple of other things on my end back in England before we go. Millwall has a solution to paying the cost of the coronavirus tests.
Okay.
For the league. Millwall is suggesting that the 3 teams that are going to be promoted pay for it out of the money that they would be getting from the Premier League.
Yeah, that sounds nice. Millwall's not going to be promoted, are they?
Nope.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Also on the board, Barnsley, who is currently last in the table in the championship, in the article in The Athletic, it's a pretty good read. They are threatening legal action over their relegation if teams that have been found guilty of violating FFP, like Birmingham City, start their season next year with a negative points total to start.
Okay. So now we're going to be mad about relegation because of financial fair play for other teams.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I get it. I mean, you shouldn't have relegation, period. That should eliminate that. But, do your thing, England. Keep making everybody angry. Have fun.
And then the last thing from me this morning out of the Telegraph, Premier League clubs will have to pay back an extra £36 million in rebates to broadcasters for every week the season goes beyond its official end date of July 16th.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And that is all part of this conversation. I thought I had a little more detail. Yeah, $36 million in rebates for every week the Premier League extends beyond July 16. That's on top of the $330 million due, even if the games are played. If the season is abandoned with no more games played, the money due back to Sky, BT, and the international broadcasters is £762 million.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Nathan, I retreated to the kitchen. That's where I finished the show this morning.
Yeah, well, they came and found me. They're right outside my window. So that's cue to wrap up. So thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for dealing with our loud noises around microphones, because there's nothing we can do. Welcome to working from home and doing a show from home in the chaos that is the world today. Stoppage time today, 2 o'clock. Facebook.com/929thegame. I'll be on with Andy and Randy at 1:20 as well for more updates on MLS and other parts of the world in the soccer front. So all that's coming up later today. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata from the dark, y'all.